according to the computer. Okay. So, hello everyone. This is the OpenWisdom 2025 Subject Selection Seminar. I'm Katherine. I'm a senior tutor team leader, and this is Eugenia. She's one of our English tutors.
Yes.
Yes. So we will be running the subject selection seminar. Alrighty. So let's get started. I will share my screen. Okie dokie. So this is a seminar in informing our Year 9 and 10 students about HSC preparation, ATAR, subject scaling, and obviously most importantly, helping you figure out what you're going to do in Year 11 and 12. So these are today's contents. We'll have the general what is going on with the ATAR, and we'll have an English, maths, and then a science overview. So I think this is a subject that a lot of people often want to know about, which is what on earth is ATAR, what on earth is scaling, and what on earth is ranking. So I'm Katherine. As I said before, I'm a tutor for the maths and science. I did get an ATAR of 98 if that's of interest to people, but I'm currently studying a Bachelor of Chemical Engineering at UNSW. So a lot of people usually wonder what is the year 11 and 12 progression? Well, you have year 11, which generally tends to run for 3 terms, and then you have year 12, which runs for 4 terms, but it also has a term dedicated to pretty much just the HSC, which you won't be going to school in, but you will be sitting your exams. So as you guys can see, the year 11 stuff does not count towards the ATAR. That's one common misconception. Only whatever you do in year 12 counts towards the ATAR, which is sort of your final ranking out of all the New South Wales students, and it sort of determines what kind of courses and what unis you can get into. So these are the progression plans for if you're a 2026 student or a 2027 HSC student. So feel free to take a closer look at this. But as you guys can see, you start year 12 in whatever your year 11 year was. So you start at term 4. That's something that's a little bit interesting. Oh, hello, sorry, we have another person. Welcome through. Hello, welcome. We are currently doing our subject selection seminar. So, what is the subject selection? Well, year 11 students must complete at least 12 units. And those 12 units must contain at least 2 units English and then 4 different subjects. So, for example, a student can be taking some advanced English, 3 units of maths, and then a couple of other different units relating to sciences and the humanities for a total of 13 units. So, as you guys can probably tell, you can do more than 12 units depending on, sometimes your school will allow this, sometimes it won't. There has been some talk about getting maths to be compulsory, but currently in the new syllabus, it is still not compulsory. So the only compulsory subject is English. In year 12, you continue on with the subjects you studied in year 11, which is why it's sort of important to choose the subjects wisely. And you must complete at least 10 units, so that's 2 less than before. You still need to do the English, and you still need to do at least 4 different subjects. And when you're in year 12, you can kind of choose to add or remove subjects. Choosing to add subjects doesn't mean choosing to add every subject. It usually means choosing to add something like 4-unit maths, which is only available in year 12. So you can't just randomly choose to add business studies in year 12 when you haven't studied it in year 11. You can do more than 10 units. It's a very, very common pattern, but the important part is for your ATAR, which is the stuff that actually matters, NESA is only going to be taking the top 10 units. So this is something to really consider when you're choosing your subjects. Again, common question, should I do 10 units, which is the minimum, or should I do 11 plus? So if you've got a student in year 11, you're doing all these subjects. For example, when you go to year 12, you can even do 12 units, right? Which in this case, they would be dropping that extension 1 and going to advanced. They could also be doing 10 units, which they dropped a subject and instead picked up Extension 2 Maths for just 10 units. You could also do 11 units if they kept the exact same configuration. So some pros and cons of doing 10 units or 11 units slash 12 units. Obviously, the 10 units is that it's very, very focused. And a lot of students find that this works for them because they prefer to do less subjects so they can spend more time on each subject. But unfortunately, if you mess up in one of your subjects, there is no getting back from that. It will be counted towards your HSC and it will be counted towards your ATAR. If you're doing 11 units or 10 units, it is a lot less risky. So if you're picking up a subject that you really, really like, but you're not sure how you're going to do in it, it sort of allows you to hedge your bets a little bit. However, again, it is inefficient. If you do 11 and 12 units, absolutely, one or two of those units that you put a lot of effort into will simply just not be counted. Me personally, I did 11 units for my HSC. Eugenia, what did you do?
I did 10, so
Yeah.
I went risky.
Yeah, so it all depends on the person. There's no one right answer. So here is a bigger picture using the data. So as we can see, right, from 2020 onwards, most people do still choose to do 10 units, right? Most people, they don't think it's worth to hedge their bets a little bit. Um, no one's doing 15 plus unit. I feel very sorry for the people doing 14 because further than maybe one or two units, there's very, very few points in doing 13 or 14 units. So figure out what is going on with your subjects when it comes to year 11 and year 12, but just know that the majority of people do end up doing only 10 units. So what is the difference between HSC and ATAR? So, people sit the HSC, they're like, okay, this is it, I'm done. Not quite. When you receive your results, you will receive an ATAR, which is essentially something ranking you and between all of the New South Wales students. So a higher rank, like 99.95, which is the highest rank, corresponds to sort of the best students, the top 0.1% of students. The lower ranks, right, in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s or even the 80s, sort of correspond to the percentage you are. So if you get a rank of 80, that's essentially saying you're in the top 20% of people. However, how does HSE mark become the ATAR? Well, you add them together to get an aggregate mark out of 500. And from that aggregate mark, that transforms into a rank, right? Again, one single mark doesn't correspond always to the rank. So 412 won't always correspond to, I don't know, 85. It also depends on how the people around you have done. So what is subject scaling? I think this is the reason a lot of people want to know about this ATAR process, is because when you talk about subjects, there's always someone that has to butt in with mentions of scaling. Does scaling actually matter? That's a very common question. I thought all the subjects were the same. Not quite. If you do think about it, a subject such as, I don't know, standard maths is obviously going to be less difficult than a subject like Extension 2 maths or advanced maths. And so their marks shouldn't be treated the same way. An 80 in standard maths doesn't correspond to sort of the same level of um, intelligence, I suppose, as a mark of 80% in something like advanced or extension. And so here is sort of the dilemma. I should do really easy subjects, so I get high marks and do a higher ATAR. Or I should do harder subjects so they scale better and I get a higher ATAR. Both of this thinking is kind of incorrect, and we'll go through exactly why. Well, there are a lot of different popular subjects in the different ATAR bands. So if we look at sort of the people range of people who got this ATAR, which is something like 99 to 99.95. So this is the pretty much the top ATAR ranks that you can possibly even get. You can see that in pretty much all of these subjects, they ended up getting very, very high. So HSC Band 6 is the most you can get in 2 units, and E4 is the most you can get in 1 unit. And if you look over here, percentage of students in this ATAR range with this result contributing to their ATAR, this is essentially like saying, hey, if you want to get a 99 to a 99.95, you need to get probably at least a Band 6 in English Advanced. If you see, 83% of students had gotten a Band 6. It does sort of weaken as you go along. Sorry. So if we look over here, generally people in different ATAR ranges tend to choose different ATAR subjects. So you can see in the 99 range, English Advanced is most common, versus in the 70 range, something like English Standard is more common. Now obviously, if you look at the extensions and the mathematics and the chemistry and physics, the same idea applies for the rest of them. And it's essentially saying, hey, people who get a really, really high ATAR tend to do well in multiple subjects, and they tend to do in multiple hard subjects. So again, compare something like chemistry and physics, which are considered quite hard, to something like biology and business studies, which are considered a little bit easier. Essentially, how the ATAR works is that these subjects, if a student does well in this subject, and they do well in all their other subjects, it tends to be considered a little bit of a harder subject. And there's one good comparison point, which is English, because everyone has to do English. So how does subject scaling work in an ATAR calculation? Well, again, if we look at the estimated ATAR, we look at the HSC mark, then we look at what the percentile is. So essentially, if you do this, what percent of people, I guess in this case, did not get this mark? And it gives you a scaled mark based on this percentile. So if you get 19 English Advanced, you're thinking, hey, that's a pretty good result. Your scaled mark, however, will only be 83.6. And that's because English Advanced is generally considered to be a little bit of an easier subject than some others. However, if you see Maths Extension 1, if you get a 90 in Maths Extension 1, that's a little bit more of a difficult thing to do. And so it ends up getting scaled to a mark that is higher than the English one. And again, look at Maths Extension 2. That is a very difficult subject, so that ends up getting scaled to a very high mark of 92. And the same idea for physics, the same idea for chemistry. So that is essentially how scaling works. Sorry. But if you look over there, right, so this first student, they tend to do what is kind of the hard subjects. So a lot of deep maths, a lot of physics, a lot of chemistry. The second student, they did easier subjects, well, quote unquote easier subjects, like general math, English standard, business studies. But if you guys look, this student got all 90s, this student got all 90s, but their ATARs are different. However, again, look at those ATARs. They're not that significantly different. Unless you're studying for something like medicine, which requires an extremely high ATAR, both of these ATARs will pretty much get you to any uni course that you really want to do. So just because this student, yes, they did choose slightly easier subject, yes, their marks weren't scaled as high, however, their ATAR is still extremely high. So it sort of goes to show scaling does play a factor, but doing well in the subjects you choose plays a much bigger factor. But if you look at this, this change seems a lot more significant. And that's because a lot more people get marks of 80 than they do of 90. So if you get all 80s in sort of the quote-unquote harder subjects, you still end up getting a pretty good ATAR. However, if you get 80 in quote-unquote the easier subjects, or the sort of the lower level, so English Standard compared to English Advanced, you don't end up getting as high of an ATAR. And the difference between these ATARs is much larger. So again, pick whatever subjects scale well and that you are good in. Don't pick a subject just because it scales well. And also, if you know you are going to do good in a subject that does not scale well, pick it anyways, because passion tends to win out over 2 years of marathon studying. So, in general, this is sort of your summary for how to select subjects based on scaling and stuff like that. So we'll go more into detail on what each one of these subjects really means, but this is a good overview slide. So you need to be in the middle of this Venn diagram. You need to have an interest in this subject. If you don't have an interest in the subject, you will inevitably burn out, run out of steam in the 2 years you're going to be studying intensely. You need to pick skill. I am good in this subject. Again, if you have a subject which you really, really like, and yet you continuously fail to sort of get the marks that you think you should be getting, again, this can sort of be fixed a little bit by implementing some better study ideas. And also, generally in year 9 and 10, people aren't as worried about this kind of thing. When it comes to year 11 and 12, people suddenly start stepping up their study game, stepping up their marks. So the skill is mostly like, hey, I completely dislike geography and I failed geography, but I'm going to pick geography because it scales well. No. So in general, you should have possibly all three of these things. So to pick a good subject, you need interest, skill, and if possible, that it scales well. Not all subjects, but if it does fall into this Venn diagram, it's a very, very good thing. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, hi, how are you?
It's just a warning, this is recorded, and if you speak, it generally tends to pop up. But feel free to ask questions along the way.
Yeah, can I ask one question?
Yes.
For example, my son is in the standard class in mathematics.
Mhm.
So, because before he was in the advanced class, because he dropped down, so he went to the standard class. So,
Mhm.
but he can do the physics good. I heard from some people, if you can get advanced mathematics and physics well, you get a plus. Even your English is not so good. So, what is your suggestion now? If he's
So,
still in the standard mathematics.
so if your son is in standard mathematics and he's doing very well, then maybe you can consider going up to advanced. However, if your son is in standard mathematics and it's pretty much he's still enjoying it, he's still studying well, he's getting top marks, and he thinks, I don't actually really want to do advanced, that is also okay. I would actually suggest trying to put those marks in these ATAR calculators and seeing sort of what the mark scales towards.
I can understand because now his method he can't go to the advanced class.
Mm.
I wrote a letter to the coordinator of the class, but he did not say he can go into it because they're
Mm.
very limited spot. So if he
Ah.
still do the center mathematics, can he do the physics? Can he study physics?
Oh, yeah, yeah, of course. So physics, we'll talk about it later once we get to the science subjects, but physics is a non-calculus class. So it actually doesn't require mathematics advanced, which teaches calculus. So at the high school level, you can absolutely do physics if you're doing standard maths. Yes.
So if he's in the math, he's not going to get to 90. So if he just 80, so what is he going to get the plus or he won't get the plus?
So again, the scaled, obviously standard does scale a little bit worse than advanced, but if you do well in standard, that still ends up counting very well towards the ATAR. So what I would do is I would really focus on improving sort of the maths within maths standard rather than trying to sort of attempt at advanced. If he does well in maths standard, he can absolutely get a 90 ATAR or even higher.
Oh, okay. So 80 is not very high in the standard, is it?
So, okay, we'll actually go through this right now because, sorry, the marks that you get at school are not necessarily indicative of what you're going to get in your ATAR because school ranking actually is far, far more important than the mark itself. So, this is a very misunderstood part of the ATAR um, subject selection kind of idea, and it is the fact that ranking matters much, much more than marks. So yes, the ranking at the schools matter, and it matters a lot more than the mark itself.
Do you mean that if the school, for example, if he is in the good school, if they can get a plus from the plus in mark from the school scale?
So again, we will be going through this right now. So essentially, the way that the ranking works is that again, what a rank is essentially your position compared to the rest of your students. So for example, if this student got 81 in English Advanced, they would get, for example, a ranking of 28 out of 150. If they got 92 in Maths Extension 1, they might be ranked fourth, but their cohort might also be smaller. etc., etc., etc. So this is what the ranking is. How does it work? Well, you sit the HSC exam. The
Mhm.
mark that you get in the HSC exam is only dependent on your HSC performance. Your HSC mark is completely uncorrelated with your school. It doesn't matter what school you went to. It doesn't matter how good you did before that. The HSC mark is the HSC mark. However, your school's internal marks are adjusted using your school's HSC performance. And this removes the difference between marking between schools. So some schools can be very harsh markers, some schools can be a bit more lax. And what this ranking system does is it accounts for that difference. So again, if you get a HSC mark of 91, you'll receive a HSC exam mark of 91. And the way the mark overall works is that it is the exam mark, the school mark divided by 2. So that's sort of how, if you guys remember those marks before that go into the aggregate works. So half of your ATAR comes from school, half of it comes from the HSC. The way this scaling works is that NESA takes 3 anchor points, which is the top student, the bottom student, and then the middle student. And it scales them to the marks of whatever the bottom student got in the HSC, the top student got in the HSC, and the middle student got in the HSC. So in this case, if you are top, bottom, or middle, you literally do get someone else's marks.
So how much I can get someone else mark?
So I'll go through this. Unless you are first, middle, or last, you will not be getting someone else's marks. Your rank does not directly match to a HSC mark. So if you're the 16th ranked student, you will not get whatever the 16th ranked HSC mark was. Because it all depends on the spread and how different statistical patterns. So the algorithm is pretty complicated. I try my best to make it clearer. So this is directly from NESA's website. If you guys can see, student A, they are first ranked in the school, and they are also first ranked in the HSC. Their examination mark of 92 becomes their moderated assessment mark, even though in school they got a 90. However, and then student F is the last ranked student in the school, and as you can see, they get 50, which is their last ranked examination mark. So that becomes their moderated school mark. But student D, you can see that they were fourth, and then they were fourth again in the HSC, which is the examination mark, but that did not actually become their mark. And that's because it was scaled, right? So some people think that they just get whatever the, fourth rank in this case is, which is 60. They do not get that. It all gets scaled. So if we look at this, right, the gaps between the students sort of reflect their gaps. So if it's in school performance, for example, D and E are close together, their moderated mark will also be close together, no matter what happened in those HSC marks. So again, you do not get someone else's marks unless you're, top, middle, or bottom. You get your mark scaled. So does it matter how your cohort performs in the HSC? Yes. Do you get someone else's mark? No. Does a good ranking matter more than a good school mark? Absolutely. So, rank is more important than the raw school marks. Your cohort performance, it does affect how high those marks can go. If you get the high rank, you get a better outcome, even if the marks themselves are averaged. If you have a low if you have a low rank, there's limited amounts of scaling. Even if you personally do well in the HSC, it might not affect what is going on with your school marks. But again, just keep in mind that the school marks are only half of what ATAR is. Sorry. Any questions about the ranking? No? Okay. So, this is something that a lot of students forget to do, and this is to check your prerequisites. This is quite important because each university course has some subjects that are either assumed or recommended for you to take in your HSC. Check what is going on with whatever course you want to do in the future. I know for a lot of Year 9 and 10 students, they're like, I have no idea. I don't know what I want to do. So take a look at what kind of options you have. Take a look at the things that you might be interested in, and then use that to figure out. So again, depends on the university. Some universities have different requirements for the same course. But if you're doing a Bachelor of Medicine, some recommended courses are English Advanced, Chemistry, and Biology. If you're doing arts, you only really need English Advanced. If you're doing something like commerce, you need English Advanced and Maths Extension 1. If you're doing engineering, you probably need a lot, like Maths Extension 1, Chemistry, and Physics. So I personally am doing engineering. I have some classmates who did not do something like physics. They found it a bit tough to catch up in the first year. But you can do things like bridging courses in case you don't end up choosing exactly perfectly initially. So this isn't the end of the world, but just keep this in mind when you're choosing your subjects. What sort of career do you want to do in the future? So frequently asked questions. What is the benefit of picking extension maths over advanced maths? Well, first benefit is that, as we saw previously, a lot of courses required extension maths rather than advanced maths. It does kind of scale a bit better, but it also helps you pick 4-unit, which is if you're interested in maths. Maths 4-unit tends to be a very, I guess, popular pick. Does my school directly affect the ATAR calculation? No. So if your school suddenly, like, say you went to an average school, but that year your cohort was really, really well, and it bumped up. So the school, like the name of the school doesn't really matter. Your cohort's performance does. Will I definitely get a low ATAR if I choose a lower scaling HSC subject? Absolutely not. If you do well in a lower scaling subject, you will get a good ATAR. It is harder to get a higher ATAR, but it is completely possible and it happens every single day. Do I get a better ATAR if I study more units? No. Only your best 10 units are counted. A band 6 in an easier subject is the same as a band 6 in a challenging subject. No, again, as we saw before, there is a difference in the scaling. Unless you get 100% in both of them, there will be some difference. But as we saw, at the top level, that difference was small. At the more average level, that difference was wider. All right, and there is going to be a new syllabus in the 2027 HSC. So if any of you guys are in year 9 or year 10, you will get the new syllabus. Some things are different, some things are similar. The year 10 students and the year 9 will have the new syllabus in English and maths for sure. Some of the creative arts, some humanities, science, PDHP are going to be changed for 2028. So this is current year 9s. And then some of them will only be changed in the 2029 HSC. Like I think chemistry is only renewed for 2029. So that doesn't necessarily affect any of you guys yet. What definitely does is the new syllabus for English and maths. All right, so stage 6 English, finally I get to bring in my co-host Eugenia.
Hello. Yes. So who am I? My name's Eugenia. I currently work as an English tutor at OpenWisdom, and I'm doing a Bachelor of Arts and Education at UNSW. So that means English teacher in the future. Yay, exciting. So for stage 6 English, there are 6 types of English you can choose from: Extension 2, Extension 1, Advanced English, Standard English, EALD, and English Studies. So on the, sorry,
Right.
sorry, oh my gosh. So on the easier scale, ELD and English studies, they would be considered like less difficult English subjects to choose to study, and English Extension 2 and English Extension 1 would be considered more difficult. The ones we're focusing on today are going to be Advanced English and Standard English because a majority of the HSC taking cohort will choose between these two Englishes. So for English Standard, the indicative hours for both year 11 and year 12 is 120 hours. So that would include like work at school and also self-study that you do at home. So there are a couple of different courses inside of year 11 and year 12. First one, Reading to Write. This is a narrative writing course, Contemporary Possibilities. This allows you to make a multimodal presentation, and close study of literature. This will be your essay-based course. for English Standard Year 12, you will have text and human experiences, language, identity, and culture, and close study of literature. All these will be essay writing courses, essentially. And for the last one, the craft of writing. This will be your creative, so you can write a narrative, a discursive, or a persuasive. So English Advanced, what you learn between these two subjects are pretty similar to each other. So the Year 11 course, you'll have reading to write and narratives that shape our world. So this is just a minor difference between the two courses you'll take. You'll have a little bit more creative work in the English Advanced and critical study of literature. So this will typically be some sort of Shakespearean text. In Year 12, you'll have text and human experiences, textual conversations, and critical study of literature, which again will be your 3 essay subjects, and craft of writing will be your creative. So which course should I choose? The main difference between English Standard and English Advanced will be the type of text that you study in these and the difficulty level. So if you believe that you're more passionate about English and you'll be more willing to study for it, then English Advanced would be a better choice for you. And if you believe like, oh, I'm not that super interested in English, but you have to do it anyway, I would recommend Standard. So take a minute to like read the different things on the screen. Yeah. Oh, and also for advanced, if you want to do extension 1 or extension 2 English, you will have to choose English Advanced. You cannot do English Standard and like extension 2. It is a like a ladder kind of. So the scaling and the average marks between the two courses there is like a bit of a difference between them, just because English Standard scales a little bit worse compared to English Advanced. And English Advanced, the people who take English Advanced are a little bit more passionate about English, so they'll be more willing to put time and effort into it. So as you can see, the median HSC mark for English Standard is a 71, and the percentage of students who get a band 6 is 1% and a band 5 is 11%. And for English Advanced, the median HSC mark is 82, and the percentage of students who get a band 6 is 14, and the percentage of students who get a band 5 is 49. So on average, people who do English Advanced will get a better score just from the statistics. Okay, so some common misconceptions and frequently asked questions. I shouldn't choose English Standard because it doesn't scale well. This is untrue. So if you believe, like, honestly, scaling does not matter in any subject that you do. If you believe like English Standard is a better choice for you and you will do better in Standard than you will in Advanced, scaling does not matter as much as like how you actually perform, essentially. So for example, if you get like a 90 in English Standard and you get like a 80 or a 75 in English Advanced, that you would be better off doing Standard, essentially. And number 2, should I buy study guides? So study guides for year 12, I'm assuming this is just like Lit Charts or Spark Notes or something along the lines of that. I would recommend not buying study guides, essentially, because the analysis that you receive in them will not be up to par to the analysis that you will have to be putting out in your essays in year 12. And paying money for that is essentially just going to be a waste of your money, in my opinion. And number 3, everything in English is subjective. I heard this phrase thrown around a lot when I was in school, but this is only correct to a certain extent. Yes, English is a very subjective subject. It is not like maths where there is a complete right or wrong answer in the question. However, the arguments that you make have to align with the general understanding of the text that is being taught to you at school and people like essentially just understand the text to be. You cannot make an argument that is so far out of left field, even if you have like good evidence and good analysis to back it up, essentially. If your argument is not within the realm of like what has been taught at school, unfortunately, you will not get a good mark. So some examples of past HSC questions. This is from the 2023 HSC English Advanced Paper 2, and this is about Mod B, which is like, Mod B is the most critical analysis of like your text that you've been given. So the question is, evaluate how your personal and intellectual engagement with your prescribed text has been intensified by its construction. In your response, make detailed reference to your prescribed text. This, like, essentially what this text is saying is how has form impacted like the theme or like the argument that you are going to study. It's a pretty general question. However, you can see by the language that it is more like academically based language, and the language used is more formal. So if this is something that like you would be comfortable with answering in the future, obviously, like a question like that, that is essentially the type of question that you will be getting in advance throughout year 11 and 12. So the curriculum reform, they have put out a new curriculum for English. This is going to go into effect in 2027. So how is this new syllable difference? There is a higher focus on a multimodal based assessment task. So things like speeches, presentations, videos, all of those will be like, this is suggestion based, but schools will most likely implement this across the board. There will be more of these type of assessment tasks. And there will also be a greater focus on text by Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islanders peoples. So the text that you read, most likely poems, novels, or just stories in general, there will be a more Indigenous-based focus. For, and the main differences are that Extension 1 and Extension 2 will now be examined online in the HSC. So previously, Extension 1 would be a written out exam, quite similar to English, but just at a higher degree of difficulty. And Extension 2 would be a completely like no exam course that you could take, where you would write a long form, either like essay, poetry, or some short like narrative. And that is not the case now. So Extension 2 will now have a final exam worth 40%, not just a major work. It will be taken online, but because of AI concerns, Extension 2 will now actually have an exam instead of just being a completely handed in work. Okay, so our Ripple course, OpenWisdom is offering, no worries. OpenWisdom is offering a like paving the road to senior English course that are going to be held in the summer holidays, like the big break in between years. So essentially what this course offers is Year 9 students will be focused on developing a Viva Voce presentation. A Viva Voce is essentially just like a spoken out or orally performed presentation. And they will construct their own Viva Voce project. They will practice body language and speech conventions and develop essential oral and conceptual skills. So essentially this course will be improving your like speech giving abilities, which is going to be pretty important considering that there has been a greater focus on multimodal these past years, and especially with the new syllabus. So this course will prepare you for these like speeches, video essays, presentation assessments that you'll eventually be getting. And also it provides critical research skills valuable for analyzing and synthesizing text in both advanced and standard English. So Band 6 tips and tricks. The first tip is to memorize your essays. So essentially what we have here is like a Lego set. So your essay will be similar to a Lego set in the sense that like you want to come in with something that's already built, but you can be able to take it apart at any moment, and you'll have memorized all these pieces of like analysis and then your quotes, just in case like the essay that you have brought in does not fit to the question. And also, on that same note, you should memorize more than just your essay. So say your essay is on like 3 specific themes. It would always be a good idea to memorize another theme and then more quotes and analysis outside of what you have already memorized for your essay. Because you don't know what's going to happen in the exam, essentially. You won't be entirely sure that your question, your prepared essay will fit to the question. And tip 2, from description to analysis to synthesis. So this is about the analysis that you have of your quotes. So for example, when you were in like year 7 to 8, your analysis would be mostly description and like just recounting what happens in the story, essentially. And what you'll be doing right now should be analysis. And the analysis that you'll be providing is just like thinking about the deeper meaning and the relationship of the text ideas to life in general. So an example of this is place is a significant factor in, I actually don't know how to say his name, poetry. The title draws our attention to the fact he sees life through place. Through the simple and factual nature of the title also provides that his feelings about place may be ambivalent. So this is not a bad response. It talks about how like the title is indicative of how this author sees place, and it relates like different elements of the text back to elements that we see in real life. However, we can take this one step further by like improving our analysis to synthesis. And synthesis is where when there is like more than one text, synthesis brings 2 texts together, essentially. You're comparing 2 things. And when there's a single text, synthesizing means to seeing every single element as a part of the whole text and bring the parts together. So an example of this is a constant feature of this author's poems is the search for belonging and what it means to be a migrant who has to renegotiate the relationship between self and place. So this would be a topic sentence in a paragraph, and what it brings is like the purpose that this author is writing about, essentially, and how it relates back into the audience. So this type of analysis will get you a greater, just like a higher score in general, because you are relating so many different factors in a clear and concise way. Okay, and tip 3 is to be well read. You've probably heard this about a million times, but reading, it honestly does very much improve like your narrative structure, how you write narratives, also your vocabulary and your grammar, and just the way that you understand text, and both writing and analyzing them.
Okay, thank you, Eugenia, for that nice talk about the English part. Now I'm going to talk about the mathematics part, which we're all excited for. So there are different levels of mathematics again. Extension 2, Extension 1, Advanced, Standard 2, and Standard 1. And just as a rule, the top 3 are the most popular. So there's also like little nicknames called 4 unit, 3 unit, and 2 unit, because they literally do correspond to that amount of total units. So we're mostly going to be focusing on Extension 1 versus Advanced. So the overall overview is, again, just different maths topics. Some of them you will do in year 11, some of them you do in year 12, some you do in both. The overall topics that are covered in advanced are functions, trigonometry, series and sequences, calculus, which is a pretty chunky one, exponentials and logs, and then stats and financial maths. So again, some of these you'll do in easier versions in year 11, like graph transformations, and then you'll do a harder version in year 12, like further graph transformations. So advanced is a calculus course, while something like standard is a non-calculus course. So just as a rule, if you will need calculus for the future career, have a go at advanced. If you do not need calculus, if you're doing maths because you think it is useful, you think it is necessary, but you're not too keen on a lot of those more technical side of maths, feel free to do standard if you think you will do well in it. How is the HSC exam structured for Maths Advanced? Well, there are a few multiple choice, and then there's a lot of questions. So this will hopefully inform the way we are going to be studying and getting Band 6s in Maths Advanced. Maths Extension 1, it will do slightly different topics, and you will build on those you will build on those 2-unit topics as well. And that is because you cannot just take Extension 1, you will take it in conjunction with Advanced, and you will need the knowledge from Advanced to do Maths Extension 1, unlike English, where sort of Extension and the Advanced are very uncorrelated. So some of the functions are, some of the topics are the same, such as functions in calculus and then stats. Some of them are just completely new topics like proof, vectors, and combinatorics. So again, if you're going Maths Extension 1, this is for digging really deeper into maths, specifically for some kind of career that may or may not involve maths in the future. So this is where something like vectors really comes into play. But I don't know anyone who tends to use vectors unless they are working in some sort of career that needs a lot of maths. So this exam is structured in a very similar way, except it is only 70 marks, and instead of being 3 hours, which the previous exam was, it is 2 hours. So it is slightly less content. And to be fair, this is a 1-unit subject compared to advanced, which is a 2-unit. So if you do maths advanced and maths extension, you will sit both exams. But if you end up doing extension 2 in year 12, you don't actually have to sit the advanced tests for that. You just have to sit the extension 1 and the extension 2 tests. So which course should I choose for year 11? Maths Advanced is, I've performed well in my mathematics so far. I'm capable of handling this. I, to a degree, enjoy problem solving, and I sort of enjoy maths at least a little bit. If you very, very hate maths, you can do well in your ATAR without doing any maths at all. But also, if you are looking to get a degree that really requires some sort of foundation in maths, so like commerce, science, and education, it is a good idea to do Maths Advanced. Doing Extension 1 is you have performed very well and you are passionate about maths. So don't just choose Extension 1 because you feel like it. You must like maths at least a little bit. That doesn't tend to be as big of a problem with English, but I know a lot of people who choose Extension 1 and then they drop out after a while, which is possible to do, mind you, just because they figured out that they do not want to do maths. And if you are going for a degree like engineering or actuarial studies, sometimes it will actually be a requirement to do Maths Extension 1. And obviously, if you're the type of person that loves maths and knows you want to do very, very hard maths, which is Extension 2, you also must do Extension 1. Similar to kind of how that English extension idea worked. So again, take a look at these checklists in the future and see which one sort of suits you best. Common misconceptions. I did poorly in year 10 maths. That means I won't do well in senior maths. Not necessarily. I think the biggest jumps in terms of marks and subjects that I've seen are going from that year 10 to the year 11, year 12, especially in maths, because there's sort of an easier way to study for it. So if you did poorly in year 10 maths, that doesn't necessarily mean you won't do well in senior maths. That just means that you need to put in a lot more effort, a lot more study, and it will be a lot more demanding than year 11 and 12. But just because you did poorly in year 10 doesn't mean you will have to do bad in senior maths. Doing maths extension will get you a higher ATAR. Again, not necessarily no. As Eugenia said before, the scaling doesn't matter if you do not do well in the subject. Or if you do well in a slightly lower scaling subject, that will 100 times out of 100 get you better marks than doing low in a high scaling subject. So if you want to get a high ATAR, I suggest again, focus on the subjects that you know and love and will do well in. Maths extension will be demanding and stressful. For some students, it was. For other students, they found it quite fun and engaging. It depends on you as a student. If you so far have not enjoyed maths, I'm not sure. Some students, maybe they will change their minds, but if you do not enjoy maths, you probably won't enjoy doing maths in senior years. However, it doesn't have to be demanding and stressful. With proper planning and proper studying, it can be quite a fun time, especially if you love doing maths. I can do well by doing lots of questions. Kind of. You can do well by doing lots of questions correctly. So, doing lots of questions is a good way to study, but again, you must do those questions correctly, you must improve. So, in my opinion, it's easier to do well it's easier to study in something like maths because you know exactly when you're wrong and when you're right. So it's a little bit easier to self-study. But just doing lots of questions won't help. You also have to obviously understand the content, understand how to apply the content, and then be able to perform well under a stressful situation. I know some students which are pretty good at maths, but the minute you put them under a test environment, they start to crack, which causes a little bit of problems. It's much easier to make a stupid mistake in maths than it is in English. So syllabus reform is that it's pretty much largely unchanged. The topics themselves have not changed. I'm assuming some of the Cambridge textbooks will change, but the math syllabus has barely changed over the past, I don't know, since 1960. So don't worry too much. Hopefully your math skills maths is maths. It will always transfer over generations. There is a slightly heightened focus on working mathematically, which is essentially doing a different concept in one question. So it's not just a calculus question, it is a calculus and financial maths question. So you're minimizing or maximizing the cost. But apart from that, again, the topics themselves are largely unchanged. Sort of the types of questions. So, Band 6 tips and tricks. Past papers are your best friend. You need to do both textbook questions and exam questions to do well. So you need to figure this out through simple questions initially to get ahead of what exactly you are doing. You're not just following a formula, you understand the formula. But you must also not forget to do harder exam questions. A lot of students, they just do some easy textbook questions and they walk in and they're like, what happened? That's because exam questions, no matter what, they're probably going to be harder than your textbook questions. And also, textbook questions, they're pretty much just single topic. Exam questions, they bring together multiple different topics, and that sort of spooks people. So you need to do both, textbook and exam. Timing. This is, again, very, very common thing. You must do past papers under timed conditions. And that is real timed conditions, not I'll set a timer for 40 minutes and then, I'll go and eat, but that doesn't really count, so I'll just add another 20 minutes. No. Locked room, no phone, just test, 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 test. Unless you do it under timed conditions, you will not be able to perform the same in your actual exams. Because pretty much every single part of this is exams. There is, I think, one assignment that you need to do, but the rest is just exams. So for the vast, vast majority of maths, it's only exams. There's pretty much no hand-ins. And again, timed conditions means real timed conditions, not, oh, let me quickly check the answers to get a clue of the next step. Again, common mistake I see. That's when you walk into the test, you're like, oh, I'm almost done. I just need a little bit of a hint. But unfortunately, you don't have the hints anymore. So real timed conditions is the key. You also need to learn how to plan out your time, which is what you'll learn in year 11 and 12, is really planning. How do I actually approach this kind of question? Again, silly mistakes. I've seen so many silly mistakes. And to be fair, I know my students can figure them out. It's not, if you gave them 10 hours, they would be able to do this test almost perfectly. That is not what you have in the HSC. That's not what you have at school. Your silly mistakes are very serious to a lot of students. You must study these mistakes, figure out where you went wrong, why you went wrong, even if it's something like I squared instead of cubing, right? Again, this usually signifies poor time management because you couldn't go back and redo the question and check it. So again, silly mistakes, extremely common, they happen to everyone. Your best bet at doing good in maths is minimizing those silly mistakes and treating them like they are serious. Even though, again, squaring instead of cubing is not the end of the world. And then we also have the sciences. Since we're running out of time a little bit, I'll try and go through these quicker. We can always stop the recording and then I'll do a bit of a Q&A at the end. So there are 6 different subjects: biology, chemistry, physics. Those are sort of the popular ones. And then we've got investigating science, earth and environmental science, and then science extension, which are sort of the more unique sciences. But we'll mostly be focusing on the first 3 for now, just because they are the most popular. So, science reform. The year 10 students here are going to be doing the current science syllabus up until 2027. The year 9 students right now will be doing a new syllabus in physics and biology. And then if any students are in year 8, in 2029, you'll be doing a new syllabus in chemistry, earth and environmental, and science extension. But unfortunately, the new syllabus isn't quite out yet, so we'll just be going through the current science syllabus for now. So biology, in science, we do these things called modules. And essentially, it's little bits of knowledge that seem kind of not connected, but they do build on each other, similar to kind of topics in maths. So if you guys are interested in exactly what the modules are, you can take a closer look. But each science has 4 modules per year. So it's a bit different, and some module 4 in year 11 tends to suffer, since you don't really have that term 4 to have a go at it. Chemistry has the same idea. It has 4 modules in year 11. It has 4 modules in year 12. And again, a lot of these, they build on each other, right? You do reactive chemistry in module 3, and then you do acid and base reactions and equilibrium and acid reactions in year 12. So the year 12 knowledge builds on that year 11 knowledge. Again, the year 11 knowledge, it's probably not majorly assessed in the HSC, but the skills that you build in year 11 will suit you well in year 12. You must know your year 11 stuff to get a handle on the year 12 stuff. Same idea for physics. 4 modules in year 11, 4 modules in year 12. Again, feel free to pause this or go back and check the exact names of these modules and get a hint of like, oh, I really like doing waves in year 9. Physics sounds kind of interesting. Because the junior sciences, they don't delineate between these as much. So the HSC exam, all of them are the same. You have a multiple choice section for 20 marks, and then you have a short and long response for 80 marks. The questions increase with difficulty, and you've got 3 hours exam plus 10 minutes reading time. So again, you're focusing a lot more on long response questions. Some of them are calculation based, some of them are like explanation based. And there is a depth study that you have to do in biology, chemistry, and physics, which is essentially you do your own experiment, you write up a whole bunch of stuff about it, and then usually you do some kind of validation test. So, how to choose? This is not based on difficulty, right? Like, standard maths is easier than advanced maths. This is not based on difficulty the same way. The way you should choose between the sciences is, again, thinking about what you enjoyed in year 9 and 10, and also seeing what's required for your uni courses. So a lot of the times, physics is required for something like engineering, while biology tends to be required for something like medicine. In general, if you like memorization, choose biology, because it's a lot of memorization of concepts, then explaining them. If you like the more mathematical application side of things, choose physics, because there's a lot less remembering, a lot less explaining, but there's a lot more mathematical applications. And chemistry, it's sort of a mix of the two. So if you're not sure, if you like both, choose chemistry. However, in scaling, as you guys can see, chemistry and physics, they're pretty close. Chemistry usually gets a little bit better than physics. And then the yellow line is biology, which tends to be a bit lower than the two. But again, choose what you will be good at, not what will scale well. If you are excellent at biology, you're the best memorizer in the world, choose biology, right? But if you like that kind of math side of things, choose physics. All right, and that's sort of the Q&A section. By the way, these are kind of the subjects we have on offer at OpenWisdom for the senior HSC kind of year 11 and 12. We also have this thing called pathway mentoring, which is like a one-on-one consultation with the senior staff. So if you guys go here and you're like, wow, I like the presentation, but it wasn't enough, you can call up for pathway mentoring for it's free by the way, one-on-one consultation with our staff, which is essentially getting some tips and tricks about all this different stuff even going beyond that, like career advice and resume tips and post-HSC stuff. So like a little bit like career counseling. And if you guys are interested or booking like a trial lesson or something like that, I know some students they like to try out like, chemistry in the holidays and see if they like it. I've had a couple of students do that. I'll tell you what, they all continued on with chemistry. You can email us or register some trial lessons. All right. That sort of brings us to the end of our presentation. I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll have a bit of a Q&A session. So just give me a second. There we go.